are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great, thank you. Could you just say a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Um, I am a grad nurse. I'm working as a research nurse for the John A. Burns School of Medicine. I've been with them for, let's say, about 8 years, doing research, and a lot of it has been also touching upon Samoan community here in Hawaii and also back to American Samoa and Western Samoa. I was born and raised in American Samoa, and then moved up here after high school, went to college for 4 years, moved to California for 5 years, also in a location where there was a lot of Samoans, and I moved back here in 2007.
Okay.
You need more.
No, that's great. What is it like in Samoa? How was it growing up?
What I usually tell people is that if you've been to Laie, it's kind of like that. And we always like to drive up over there because it reminds us a lot of Samoa. It's small. We have one lane going, one lane coming. It is very, the culture is very much strong in the school, in the village, wherever you go. That saying, it takes a village to raise a child. That's really how it was growing up. If you cut school or if you said a bad word somewhere, by the time you get home, your parents know about it already because people will report back or they've seen it. I guess in terms, like, we probably define it as like a more rural area, but we're not up to date with a lot of our technology or things like that, but it's more, to me, it's like open and free and laid back. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But usually what I just tell people, if you've been to Laie, it's very similar to that. There's more open space, not as crowded, but like over here, everything is so crowded. You can hear what your neighbor's doing, or there's so much traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the culture is very strong. It is a very religious island. You have prayers in school. You have prayers in the government, like before they start meetings or before things go in session. And there's that hierarchy that exists, with the high chiefs and people in high positions. There's a lot of respect that's given to people, both in government ranks and also in cultural ranks, meaning like those who are high chiefs and things like that.
Okay, great. I also know that you co-authored a book about Samoans, specifically their health disparities. Could you share a little bit about it?
Yes. So I sent you a copy of the book chapter, and I will defer to most of the information that's there. It gives a lot of really good information about the background of Samoa. I think we included where we think, the people of Samoa came from. But it also talks about when American Samoa became a U.S. territory, but also discussed the other Samoan islands, how they're an independent country and they have a different form of government than American Samoa. We did look at health. So that was basically looking at someone here in Hawaii, and some of the problems, not just health, but also socioeconomically, that some of the challenges that they have faced. So like one of the things that we discussed in the book is that Samoans have the lowest age, what's the best way to say this? So when we're looking at the average age of when people died of the different races, we were looking at Samoans at the youngest age, meaning they're dying young, compared to all the other minorities, or actually to all the other races that exist here in Hawaii, and so that was important. There's just like the U.S., there's a lot of people who die from cancer, who die from secondary to having stroke, diabetes. Like, we have a lot of those problems. We just kind of touch briefly about it in the book, because the book doesn't just talk about just health, it also talks about the changes and like people trying to adjust, trying to adapt to the American way of life, and just trying to find their role and how to be still incorporate their culture while living in a place where there's also the American culture. So, and that answers your question. Tell me if you want something more specific, because I don't know, it's just very broad, and I can't really just pinpoint on one thing. So if you want something specific,
no, that was good. So you talked about some factors, but I just could you relate some of the factors that you mentioned earlier that affect health disparities in Samoa, such as like the environment or political change? I think last time you did I really liked how you compared the differences between Western Samoa and American Samoa.
Also, in the book chapter, it does mention like the Western influence when the U.S. Pretty much took over American Samoa, and it wasn't like they just came and took over. It was agreed upon with the high chiefs, and they wanted the agreement. But it talks about the Western influence and how there was some good influence, like in healthcare, and then there were some not so good influences, such as diet. A lot of the Western diet, they started introducing canned food. So, instead of people going out to fish, they were now just going to buy canned tuna or canned mackerel. And then, someone's love mayonnaise. So, like, all those little things, it tastes good. It's so easy to get. We have, one of the most successful McDonald's in American Samoa in the whole Pacific Rim.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I can't remember, but they cited something that it brings in the most revenue compared to, like, including Australia. So a lot of people now have more administrative jobs. There's teachers, there's not so much people, like back then, people had to work for their food. They worked their plantation, taro plantation, banana plantation, all those things. They go fishing. You don't see that often, and compare that to the other Samoa, formerly Western Samoa. A lot of people still rely on that lifestyle, and part of it is because they just can't get those kind of jobs. They're just, well, I guess what you'd say, poor. So they don't have money to go buy, these canned food, so they have to grow their own food. But these people are very lean, and they're very healthy. They're very built. They can easily climb up coconut trees. It's very rare to find someone in American Samoa to climb up a coconut tree, and if someone is climbing up the coconut tree, chances are that person really was from the other Samoa who's visiting, and that's what happens a lot. So a lot of it is the Western influence. We see things on TV. If you talk to people there, they know what's going on in the U.S. And people see it and they want it. Like we have KFC, we have L&L. They just see all this good food and they want it, but there's a lack of education on like moderation, or on talking about sodium, how this contributes to high blood pressure, how it contributes to obesity. A lot of it is it's so much good stuff, good tasting stuff, and that people are just consuming it, and they're not being educated on the dangers of too much sugar, on the dangers of too much sodium, of good fat versus bad fat, you know. Mm-hmm. So there's a movement that's happening, but it's, you know, for the generation, I say my father's generation right now, it's almost too late for them, but for the younger generation, they're trying to really educate them on making healthy lifestyle choices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. What is their doctrine?
Christianity is the primary religion. I'm not familiar with any other that may exist, but it is predominantly Christian. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Just how it's such a big factor, or how it plays into people's health.
Yes. So also in the book chapter, it has a really good discussion about why religion is really important. I'll let you read into that.
I will. Thanks.
You know, like we have legends. And each culture has legends or stories. So, you know, story goes that a greater God. So we had, you know, our Samoan gods, just like how you know, in Greece they have like Zeus, and so we had our own. But there was a story that a greater God is going to come. And so sure enough, shortly after that, that's when the missionaries came. And so that's when they adopted Christianity. So a lot of it is connected to that. And they give a lot of, it's very important. The religious community is very important. Like I said, even when we have government meetings or whatever, there's always prayer. And usually if there's the governor present and let's say a pastor present, usually the honor is given first to the pastor because that's God's servant as opposed to a servant for the people. So pastors are highly esteemed. Churches, if you see, the churches are huge there, very elaborate, very, you know, very beautiful. And it is a big part of the culture. You know, although they're saying, you know, it's from the Western, it's big, because that's the first missionaries that came, but like I said, going back to not someone legend or someone warning that came, our elders saw the missionaries and introducing the Christianity God as the God that was foretold to be the bigger and greater God than our gods that our ancestors grew up with. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, thanks. What is the overall perception of health among Samoans? I think I remember you shared your friend and her dad that kind of came over here to seek help, came from Samoa to the U.S. to seek help, and that it is what it is attitude.
So a lot of people, you know, they believe that God is in control, and they do accept that some things are consequences of their actions, and some things they don't understand, but they have that peace in God that, you know, who am I to argue with God? So my friend came up with her dad. He was like in his early 60s. They did his test for some tests, and it turned out he has esophageal cancer. And according to the doctors, he's the youngest that they've seen with this kind of cancer.
Oh, wow.
But he's a heavy smoker and heavy drinker. And when we went to go visit him, he said, you know, I knew smoking was bad. I know drinking was bad, but I still did it. And now this is the consequences of my action. And, you know, I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I just pray that God would forgive me. And if my time comes, you know, I'm fine with it. I'm not mad at God. I accept what has been dealt to me. So, you know, part of it, he does know that part of it is his fault. He knew, you know, smoking was bad. He really was a heavy drinker. Um, but he took comfort in God, and a lot of Samoan people are like that. I think they would handle bad news a lot better because of their faith in God. And so, and that's how it is. I mean, like my mom, she was 47, she died of cancer, and at one point she was getting better, and then at one point, she just she had an infection, and after so much treatment, you're already immunocompromised, so she had an infection, and she just didn't have enough in her to fight off the infection, so she eventually died of septicemia, where she had bacteria in her blood, but she was saying, I'm fine. Like, you just live a good life, and I'll see you in heaven. And that's a common theme that happens a lot with people because of that faith. And some people also, like, they don't go see a doctor because they just try and pray. And this leads to another conversation. Like, they first would seek out, like, a traditional healer. And then as a last resort, they go to Western medicine.
Okay.
And sometimes by then, it's already too late for the Western medicine to, like an antibiotic to take effect. So a lot of it, we just need more education. That I've seen traditional healers. I've seen it work, and I'm very, with my medical background, I'm very suspicious of those things. But I've seen it work. I've seen it heal, and I was like, whoa, we need to do research on this. And so, I'm not saying that people shouldn't, but I think it's important that they go hand in hand, that they should also try and check, if there's free screening for breast cancer or certain cancer, we want to promote that. But then again, also, it's a culture where they're very honest, meaning that they don't like to strip down for things. Like pap smears and breast cancer or prostate cancer. Like, when it happens, it has to be the person of the same sex. And that still happens here in Hawaii. They would not feel comfortable. Like my sister-in-law right now, she's pregnant. And she has to wait for, like, she's like 4 months, but she has to wait an extra month because all the other doctors, but she didn't want a male doctor, she wanted a female doctor. And that happens a lot in our culture. They just don't feel comfortable. Or they just like being embarrassed, like because they have a sore, like in their side, and you don't even want to tell the doctor or nurse. So a lot of it, we just want to try to educate the people that there's this confidentiality, but we do want to treat you, and just try to overcome that stigma. And yeah, I don't know. I'm going on and on here.
Okay.
You want me to elaborate on something?
No, that was good. You actually hit like 5 of the questions I was going to ask you. So now I just want to talk briefly about healthcare in Samoa. What kind of system do they have over there? Do people easily have access to healthcare? When we talked about this before, you compared it to the U.S.
Yeah, so we do get a lot of funding from the U.S. And like we have a Medicare system. Whoever's handling healthcare in Samoa is not doing a good job. They have a whole systems problem. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of specialists. So I understand they're trying to do the best that they can. But in the past, there's been so many bad, I guess, PR that's been coming out of the hospital that people don't even care to go to the hospital anymore unless you're about to die. Like the concept that we have here of having a primary care provider, we don't have that in Samoa. Usually for a cold or you sprained your ankle, you go to the ER. You know, you don't call your doctor and make an appointment. So usually the ER could be filled with people who have the flu, you know, things like that, that usually you'd see your primary care provider get some medication. We don't have like insurance here, like we have HMSA or Kaiser. Excuse me, if you go to the ER, I think the last time it was like, I don't know, maybe $5. You pay $5. At most, it would be $20. And you go see the doctor, and then they prescribe you some medication. You pick it up, and you go home. We're short on a lot of staff, like I said, doctors and nurses, and so there's just a lot of help that's needed. A lot of it needs to focus on preventive health care, and just people trying to understand the system, maybe have more people go in for checkups and screenings. Those who are not born in American Samoa, let's say if you're from the other Samoa, or if you're from visiting, you're a U.S. citizen and you're visiting, you may end up paying a lot more. But, you know, compared to here where you go to the ER and you can end up with a $3,000 bill, in Samoa you probably just end up with just like $20, $100 at most.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very subsidized, but it reflects on the healthcare that you get too. So, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. They just don't have. Okay, so like my nephew that we brought up in December, he had GI problems, and they just had to do an X-ray. They kept doing the X-ray because the CT scan was down for like a whole month.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't.
Oh, wow.
You know, they had to open them. You had to have surgery 4 times because they were just going off of what they could see from the regular X-ray. And so sometimes that happens. Sometimes the CT scan goes down and it takes a month, 2 months before it gets fixed. Sometimes they're out of medication. Sometimes the doctor will only come see you once for 5 minutes, and then you'd be talking to a nurse, and a nurse could have up to like 18 patients to care for. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and, you know, people are trying their best, but the people just don't trust the hospital as much anymore. So what happens is they try and bring their loved ones off island. They try to bring them to Hawaii, which is the closest U.S. state, and that happens a lot. They just raise their own funds, bring them here, and they go to the ER. And because they're U.S. nationals, they can easily qualify for, like, Quest, the insurance for the state. And then they get the health care that they need. They end up with no bills. They get better, and they can go back home. Or if they decide to just, you know, live here and get a job.
Okay.
So that happens a lot.
Okay, that makes sense. Going back to the shortage in staff in, you know, in some of the hospitals, could you talk about what you saw in the news about having them kind of bringing in nurses from the Philippines as their solution to solve the shortage problem? And has this been successful?
So we have like nurses, we have more LPNs than we do RNs, because there's not that many RNs. A lot of it, you know, it's just hard, and people just are fine being LPN. And so what the government did was to recruit nurses from the Philippines, and I was really surprised when I went back last year, and there were a whole bunch of Filipino nurses around. Not that, you know, that's bad, but I was just surprised. Usually when I go visit home, you know, I usually don't go to the hospital. I never had a reason to go to the hospital. I just read about stuff that was going on. But that was very interesting for me. But the thing is, now there's the language barrier because, you know, these new nurses, they don't speak someone. They're not too familiar with a lot of the culture. And so, you know, there could be some anger between someone patient and the nurses because they don't understand each other, or there's just that prejudice, like you don't know anything. You can't tell me like I can't eat this food because you're not from one and you don't understand. We love this kind of food. It's part of our culture. Like, who are you to tell me I can't eat, no more of this food? So it's easier and can be easily accepted if it's from one nurse, explaining to one patient as opposed to Filipino nurse explaining. The thing is, if we have doctors from the U.S., let's say they're U.S. doctors or U.S. nurses, people would have more respect for them. But I think it's just, it's a new thing. People are trying to adjust, trying to understand. And we are trying, we have programs where we are trying to promote more of those who are LPNs to pursue their RNs. But it can only take, I think they said they can only take like 6 to 8 students per year. And it's a 2-year program. But I don't know. A lot of it, they can't afford to pay them as much. So like I had considered going back home and working, but when I asked a friend like, how much do you get paid? And she said RNs get paid between $28,000 to $30,000 a year. And I was like, well, okay. But they work hard, meaning that some of them pull double shifts. Some of them are, instead of working 3 days a week, they're working like 5 days a week, 5 hours, 5 days, 12-hour shifts, because there's such a shortage, or they need the money. So even doctors don't make that much. We do get a lot of medical admissions. Like right now, they had a medical admission come down with the Troy Polamalu Foundation. And I believe they had almost 200 people wait in line for the clinic, and then they have to shut it down. And that was just for one day. And then the next day, the same amount of people were lining up, and they'd wait for hours to see a specialist from the U.S. Because they're more credible than what we have there. And it's not to say that they're not qualified. That's just, most of them are just, it's general medicine. And so if you have something specific to the GI tract or cardiac, they may not have all the knowledge and all the information that they need, or they may not even have access to the medication that they need. So.
Okay, that was really good. Thank you. Just wanted to talk about obesity, since Samoans are known to be one of the largest groups with high obesity rates. What are the contributing factors, and what solutions are out there?
Part of it is definitely cultural. Hawaiian people, they love to eat, and we love to gather around food. A lot of it, we just need to be educated on making healthier food choices or healthier cooking options, and working on serving sizes. But, a lot of it, food is a big part of the culture. So, like, if we have a wedding and, like, there's a lot of variety of food and there's so much it's like buffet style, that's a great wedding. And if you have a wedding where they serve not as much food, or you end up with like a small plate, or you run out of food, it was not a good wedding. So some of it, is a reflection of, well, God has blessed us, and so we are going to prepare this much food. I mean, a lot of it, it's really hard to tell people, stop eating this food. So, for instance, like one of the favorite dishes is turkey tail, and it's a lot of fat. I don't even like eating it. Like, I don't even know why people like eating it, but my family loves to eat. But it's mostly fat. And I don't know if you recall, but when we had a cultural panel and we had the other lady, she was a former Met band, and she's someone, and she said she went to visit, I don't know if it was Arkansas, somewhere where there's the Titan factory. And so they had said over there, like, they mentioned that, American Samoa is our main recipient, the main biggest buyer of the turkey tails. And she was like floored at that. It's like, yeah, we're probably the only people who eat that stuff. But it's very fatty. So what they're doing is, there's definitely messages that they're sending out to the people to try and incorporate, more fruits and vegetables that's locally grown, to try to stay away from like canned food, packaged food, chips and cookies and all that stuff, but to try and go back to our roots, to the land, fishing, plantations, trying to go back to that, because we also cook a lot with coconut milk, and so a lot of people, like especially in preventive health, public health, are trying to educate people on serving sizes and things like that. But it is hard, because some of them do live in poverty. They don't make as much money, so it is cheaper to live off of ramen and Spam as opposed to, getting chicken and all the vegetables that go for a vegetable soup, chicken vegetable soup. So I don't know. I mean, there's something's definitely happening. Fitness-wise, we have Zumba down there. We have CrossFit. We have, I forgot the other ones. We have Tai Bo. We have all of those down there. Like, there's a movement that's happening, and they're trying to, get all the fun exercises. A lot of people love Zumba because you're dancing, and someone's love to dance. And taking, so they're trying to get that, but I think what's very important is nutrition, what they're eating. And a lot of people, like, they would reward their children. Okay, I'll take you to McDonald's to get good grades. It's a birthday, let's go to McDonald's. Graduation party, let's go to McDonald's. So a lot of it is just trying to teach people, but I think a lot of people don't make the connection between obesity and heart attack and high blood pressure and stroke. They don't make the connection. So if we focus on providing them with education in the Samoan language, and that is culturally sensitive and appropriate to the different crowds, I believe people would start to really make lifestyle changes. I'm sure people do want to live long. They want to live. Children grow up and their grandchildren. A lot of people may think that, okay, I'm so overweight, there's no way I'm going to lose weight anymore. Sometimes you get a lot of that. People just feel hopeless. So those people need a lot of help. They probably need like a more structured, comprehensive weight loss plan. So just things like that you probably maybe have this one nutritionist, maybe just one or two people, and they're trying to help an island with over 60,000 people. So I don't know. It's something that we've been thinking about. There's definitely dialogue. There's definitely programs that are being implemented. Part of it, we just need to research what's the most effective approach to reach these people. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Do you actually know of any programs that are implemented right now that I can look up?
In Samoa.
Any specific programs?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure there are, but I will tell you that, the last thing that they would do is create a website. So chances are, if there is something there, you won't find information about it online.
I know that's the hard part. Maybe I'll check in the news.
Yeah, because things that I know of, I would read in the news every now and then. But there's always an initiative, like Get Moving initiative, and little things like that they try to get like church youth to compete in, let's say, volleyball games, or so it's programs in that regard. I guess if there are programs, it might also be related to research. So you could probably try Google obesity program American Samoa and see if something comes up, because it may be something that's just implemented at the hospital or at a clinic, and so it may end up coming up as something that was published in a paper. I do know, they've had some stuff about diabetes and things like that. So maybe instead of focusing on the whole island, like they would just focus on those who are coming in a certain clinic. But off the top of my head, I cannot think of like a certain name, but I just know there are stuff that exists.
Okay, I'll look into that.
And if I find something, I'll send it to you.
Oh yes, I would appreciate that. So sorry, Pete. Oh, this is my final question, but it's probably going to sound repetitive. But what are what's being done in Samoa right now to address health issues? Issues in health, like any type of disorders, obesity, cancer, diabetes, or even issues in the healthcare system. Or what do you think is needed among Samoans overall?
I don't know. I guess, for me, a big part of it is education. And I believe the nurses and doctors and someone need to also have continuing education. Sometimes they do come out for conferences. But, they're probably all burnt out and overworked and having to repeat themselves, that they just find themselves not providing education, appropriate education. But I think it's very important that the healthcare providers, they probably need a retreat of some sort to remind them of why they're in healthcare. A lot of it, I know they need to be educated. And okay, so for example, like I never wanted to be a nurse because nurses were always mean in the hospital. You go in, you're sick, and they'd scold you. Like, well, why did you let your daughter go out and play in the rain? And da-da-da-da-da. You shouldn't have done that. So nurses had a really bad reputation. And when my father was here, he ended up having emergency dialysis, and we had to coordinate with American Samoa because he wanted to go back home for him to have dialysis there. And a nurse talked to me like, why do you want to bring your dad home? Just leave him up there. And I'm like, his home is in American Samoa. That's where his friends are. That's where the rest of our family is. He wants to come home. And he's like, well, I don't know why you want to come home for. And, they're very unhelpful. And I think a big part is that they're just stressed and they're burnt out. And so that's why a lot of people don't care to go to the hospital, or they don't. Like, it's almost like the healthcare professionals in Samoa are losing their credibility, and people don't care anymore about what they say. And but I hear this often, when someone finds a good doctor or a good nurse, they'll say, oh, that's a really good nurse. She really explained this to me and told me why I shouldn't eat this and that. And so when people do that, I believe that people are listening. It's just, we kind of need to go back and work on the system and really provide education and really use, we have the different villages, and within the villages they have village mayors, and those villages, and each family, they have high chiefs, and people listen to their high chiefs, people listen to their village mayors, because let's say, like, sometimes the village mayor would come over to our place and say, you guys need to cut your grass, it's really overgrown and it's unsightly, and people will do it. People will mow their grass, and it's like, oh, there's so much trash, you guys need to pick it up. So all of those are cultural infrastructure that exist, and we need to tap into it from a public health perspective, as in healthcare, and use those to provide education to the villages, have focus group sessions to really go back and forth with people. Do they understand why sodium is bad? Do they understand what's carbohydrate, what's starch, what food has too much, how much starch, and all of that, and give them ideas. If you don't have much money, if all you can eat is ramen, okay, try throw in some vegetables and don't put in too much of the sauce. There's ways to try and make it work for these families. And maybe what they don't have is that they don't have money to do this, or they don't have people to do this, or in theory it sounds good, but they're like, well, who's going to do it? Someone's going to do it, but I'm not going to do it. So people do listen. People will listen, and it's not perfect. No matter how much statistics that's out there in the U.S., people still will eat what they do, or they'll still smoke, but a big chunk of people will listen. A lot of them, they just don't know, or they feel like there's nothing they can do because they don't have the resources, they don't have the money, so they're just kind of like stuck in this loop, and it goes on to their children, and continues on. But yeah, that's like, if I were to do something, I'd really tap into infrastructure that's already existed in the villages, in the churches, and like, a lot of people belong to a church. A lot of people, everyone belongs to a village. It doesn't matter what your private land is. You're part of the village, and it's not like to force people, but you could put something on TV, but not all families have TV, and you're competing with with people who have cable, who would rather watch an action movie or some drama that's going on than watching a public health message. But if whether it's just for 15 or 20 minutes, like going to a church event before they start, and you just share some information or share some tips on ways to do exercise, or way to cook like stir fry and including vegetables, something like that, I believe it would be really beneficial. So, I mean, and you'll see that there's a lot of research that has been done that interventions in the Samoan churches would be very effective, because that's what brings people together and families together. And especially if the church leaders support you, like I said, there's a lot of respect for the hierarchy, that whether or not they don't want to be there, but because they respect the pastor, they'll be there out of respect, and then they're listening to something. And like I said, they won't force people, but even if they just encourage, like, oh, just come for 15 minutes of your time to hear this important message, people would do it, and then they would spread the word, and I think that's a good way to go. So
yeah,
it'd be interesting to see how things go in the future. I mean, I would love to go back home and do all of that, but right now I have a child, and with the healthcare back there, I am scared. So that's one of the main reasons why I didn't move back. Because at one point my son was hospitalized. He had an infection that went into his blood, and they caught it early, and that's scary. And in Samoa, they just don't have that, and so I'm just I do plan to eventually go back and help my people, but in the meantime, I help them from here in Hawaii through a lot of the research that we do, and we do have research where we do go back to Samoa and work at the hospital setting and collect data and publish it and give it back to the government agencies. So, yeah.
Oh, great. Well, that's all I have for you. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you wanted to share?
Um, I mean, there's a lot of, you might be able to find some research that's out there, and there are always different perspectives. What I've shared is a lot of things that are common themes that I've seen and witnessed growing up, not only in my family, but people that we know. And I hope it's even helpful. If something else comes up, just, send me an email. Let me know if you need me to clarify on something.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Thanks for letting me interview you.
You're welcome. Good luck with your paper.
Thank you.